Hello and welcome to the 31st installment of my grading of all of the base game cards. If you want insight into the grading system, check out the description or click on the link in the top right hand corner to get to the first video, where I explain it all. But let's get started. The first card in today's video is one of the most quintessential cards in Terraforming Mars, to an extent that there's even a standard project with the exact same name, Power Plant. If you think about power production, it's this card that pops to mind first. It's incredibly cheap and does exactly what you expect of it. I will tell you now that I'll put it into C tier, and then I'll explain why it should land there. Let's compare it to mine, another card that costs 4 MC, grants 1 prot, and one that I also placed in C tier. You might say, wait, why is power plant not higher up than mine? Power production is useful at all stages of the game, early and late, and that was the main critique of mine. That card is only really useful in the first few gens. Well, the thing with Power Prod is that in contrast to the other production types, it's not universally useful. It's a means to an end. You get Power Prod to play power-hungry cards or to activate certain cards or to trade if you're playing with colonies. Yes, it can also be used as heat, but in that case it's just straight up worse than heat itself. And because power cannot be stored, one Power Prod is not useful in a lot of cases. This means that while mine is only useful in the early game, it's at least valuable to play on its own there, while Power Plant often is only played if you have a card to follow it up, especially because of cards like energy tapping. So yes, I'm confident to place Power Plant in C tier. Next up, I want to talk about Power Supply Consortium. I think this card will bring about the second case of me changing the original placement of a card in the ranking. Why? Because I want to place Power Supply Consortium in the same tier as Energy Tapping, since I think that while they have their differences, these two cards are basically the same. And while I placed Energy Tapping in C tier originally, I want to place them both in B tier, now that I think about it again. Why? Well, Power Supply Consortium and Energy Tapping are two of the most influential cards in the entire game. When teaching Terraforming Mars to beginners, I always tell them that when they want to play a power-hungry card, they should increase their power prod and then decrease it in the same go. Never give your opponent the chance to tap you in between. A power production costs 7 or 8 MC on average, meaning that PSC is an instant swing of 14 to 16 MC for 5+3. And that's if the opponent has a way of efficiently increasing his power prod again. If not, he's stuck using the standard project for 11 MC. So yes, I'll adjust energy tapping to B tier, and that's where I will place PSC as well. What differentiates these two cards? Well, PSC is harder to play, but doesn't hurt as much in the late game. From one hate card to the next, let's talk about Predators. If this card works out perfectly, meaning it comes down rather early and then hits a 1-point animal on your opponent's side, it's one of the biggest point swings in the entire game. Additionally, together with Ants, it's one of the best cards for Eccentric. But of course, it doesn't always work out that way. Most of the time, you're only hitting a half-point animal, since those come down earlier. Sometimes your opponent doesn't even play an animal card, and sometimes they have protected Habs. And then, in other circumstances, the oxygen lags behind and you get just one activation out of Preds. To summarize, I like Preds less than other 1-point animals because it doesn't only rely on a global track moving up fast to score well, it also relies on what your opponents do to score it all. Of course, there are other scenarios where you can play Preds. Maybe you want to eat your own half-point animals, or you have a large convoy on hand and just want an outlet for the 4 animals you get from it. But in those situations, it scores much worse and every other 1-point animal would be better. Predators has the highest ceiling but also the lowest floor of all animal cards. For me, it's a B tier card due to its inconsistency. When you just talked about Predators, I mentioned its hard counter, Protected Habs, and we'll have to talk about that card next. In the base game, there's no other card with a similar effect, and that effect is game-changing. Not only being safe from Predators and Ants, but also from all of the asteroids is just amazing. Not only will this just directly save you a lot of points, it will also enable you to safely fund Landlord, Estate Dealer, Desert Settler, Cultivator and Eccentric a lot of the time. A card that grants you that much safety on so many awards is insanely strong. But it doesn't stop there. In addition to that, protected tabs makes you much more flexible in your sequencing, which can indirectly score you a lot of points. What do I mean by that? Well, if you don't have protected tabs, you often want to open your gen by converting your plants to a greenery, to deny your opponents the chance to hit you with an asteroid. Sometimes you'll even need to play a card that grants you instant plants like throwing a comet first to get to 8. This often prevents you from making other important time-sensitive plays, like claiming a milestone, placing a city, funding an award, or claiming a bonus bump. With protected tabs, you don't have to worry about your plans being destroyed, and you can make that other time-sensitive play first and convert your plans later. And all of that for just 5 plus 3 MC. For all of this card's benefits, it's heavily losing in value in the late game drafts. It doesn't score any points on its own, and is just a giant what-if scenario. What if my opponent had hit me with demos? What if my opponent had played predators? I think protected tabs is A tier because of that. It's one of the most influential cards early on and can shape your game plan if you get it on your starting hand. But there are many more potent cards in the late game. And lastly, let's talk about Protected Valley. This card is very simple on the surface, but in reality it's not. You might think, well, it costs 3 MC more than an SP greenery if you buy it in a draft, and for that you get 2 MC prot. Well, if you compare it to Plantation, it costs 8 MC more than that, so you get 1 MC prot for 4 MC, which indeed is a fair price in the early game. But there are some things to consider, some bad, some good, and some neutral. Let's start with the bad. The combination of a greenery and MC prot is kinda awkward. If there's no gardener in play, there's little reason to play a greenery super early on if you have to pay 23 freaking MC for it. This heavily clashes with the MC prot, which loses in value the more you delay it. Then there's one point which is neutral on average, the fact that you have to place Protected Valley on an ocean tile. You don't have to place it next to existing tiles of yours, which is normally the rule of greeneries, so that's great. But sometimes you'd rather continue your ocean walk or place it somewhere else entirely, so the placement restriction kinda averages out in my opinion. And then the upsides. Protected Valley comes with a building tag, which makes it an excellent steal sink in the mid to late game, as well as for claiming the oxygen bonus bump, something which is hard to come by. And B, in contrast to the standard project, Protected Valley comes with a plant tag as well, fitting nicely into the green combo. All in all, I think Protected Valley just makes it into B tier. It's definitely on the edge to C tier in my opinion though, but the fact that it's one of the best steal sinks in the late game just pushed it into B tier for me. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments whether you agree with my ratings, or if not, how you would have rated them differently. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And lastly, please check out my Twitch and my Twitter. See you in the next video.